Train busting. Throughout the war, the principal Allied strategy for destroying German trains was to bomb rail yards using large-scale raids. But as the Luftwaffe fighter force diminished, attacks on trains ramped up. In the West, starting in early 1944, more and more British, Canadian, and American fighters began attacking trains and locomotives directly on their lines. They further improved their strategies to do so. During the same time, escort fighters guarding bombers were granted permission to attack targets of opportunity on their return flights. In May of 1944 alone, Allied fighters were destroying 40 trains per day in the West, more than Germany could hope to replace this late in the war. To appreciate the value of train busting in the West, it's important to understand Germany's rail network and how it was stretched to its limits by conditions in the East. The Deutsche Reichsbahn, or German Reich Railway, was amongst the most vital of Germany's infrastructure during the war, if not the most vital. It is unlikely a wartime Germany would have been able to function without it. It was utilized for the movement of men and equipment for virtually every major battle the Germans fought, right up until the end of the war. Even late war battles like the Battle of the Bulge saw tanks transported from Hungary to the Ardennes using the Deutsche Reichsbahn. Leading up to the war, Germany had an impressive locomotive industry. The Deutsche Reichsbahn had been described as the largest enterprise in the capitalist world in the years between 1920 and 1932. In the 1930s, Germany had about 21,000 steam and 500 electric locomotives. Germany also had a large export industry for locomotives, meaning that in a time of war, this production could be put to use for the military's needs. Germany started World War II in good logistical shape for its immediate needs and incorporated captured railways and locomotives in territories like France and Poland. Locomotives in captured territories could be seized or leased, as Germany tried to encourage the normal functioning of railway industries in occupied nations, though slave labor would increase as the war progressed. These newly acquired countries were easy to integrate for Germany. For one, their tracks had the same standard railway gauge or width, meaning German trains could travel on them. The Soviet Union would be a rail problem dwarfing the needs of all of Western Europe. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union on the 22nd of June 1941, Germany's Eastern Railway Division, or Ostbahn, would be completely unprepared for the requirements of supplying men and equipment over distances of up to 2,000 kilometers. The preparations for the invasion of the Soviet Union saw the greatest troop deployment by rail in history. To transfer a panzer division from Germany to the Eastern Front could require up to 300 trains, factoring in the tanks themselves, men, and equipment. Add to that regular supply demands, fuel, food, ammunition, then multiply it over the entire Eastern Front, and it's obvious Germany's rail supply line would be extremely fragile. Besides straining locomotives to work these great distances under harsh conditions, the Wehrmacht undertook to convert just over 16,000 kilometers, or 10,000 miles of Soviet tracks, to German standard gauge track between the 22nd of June and the 8th of October 1941, a massive logistical undertaking on its own. The Soviets further destroyed or withdrew much of their rolling stock and locomotives on their retreat. In 1942, it's estimated that upwards of 1/3 of the over 5,000 locomotives transferred to the Eastern Front were in need of repairs, just for maintenance unrelated to combat. This strained the entire rail network, not just in the East, but in Germany as well. Locomotive production ramped up to 500 locomotives a month in mid-1943, which Germany sustained between July and October. But even this wasn't enough to meet demand. Production was impressive though. Germany, unlike with some of its tank designs, produced very simple locomotives, such as the DRB Class 52, of which 7,794 were built during and even after the war, up until 1950. Due to the high demands on trains in the East, trains in the West were strained, and therefore rail networks were more vulnerable to air attack. By war's end, the American 8th Air Force alone claimed 4,600 locomotives. The Americans specifically began training to strafe locomotives and other small ground targets over Europe in March of 1944. The P-51, P-38, and P-47 were all capable in this role, but the P-47, with its 6 to 8 50-caliber machine guns and ability to take punishment from ground fire, would be one of the best train busters of the war. The P-47 had a large radial engine, which essentially shielded the aircraft during head-on attacks. In attack camera footage, you can distinguish the P-38 from the P-47 and P-51 because of the tighter grouping of fire from the nose-mounted guns. For a P-47 or P-51, you will see gunfire shown as tracers converging at a point, then crossing. Sometimes you can see tracers acting erratically in footage. These rounds might be tumbling after being fired from overheated guns. The pilot may not have waited long enough between bursts for the guns to cool down. Flashes come from a target when incendiary or armor-piercing incendiary bullets make contact. These bullets could ignite fuel being hauled by trains, but not coal in the tender. A large release of steam can indicate the boiler has been breached by gunfire. A horrible fate for a train's crew, potentially burning everyone operating the locomotive, though an engineer may also vent the boiler in an emergency shutdown. The British and Canadians were the first to train bust in the West, particularly over France. This is a Royal Canadian Air Force video titled Train Busters from 1943, encompassing some of the aircraft the RAF and RCAF used, including Mosquitoes, Hawker Hurricanes, Spitfires, and even Mustangs, amongst larger bombers. The Canadians and British were able to share their experience train busting with American pilots arriving in Britain. Tactics evolved for both attacking trains and defending trains. By mid to late war, the majority of German trains had flak and machine guns for defense, particularly important as Luftwaffe fighter defenses diminished. This is an illustration from a US 8th Air Force manual showing how a Flak 38 can be concealed inside a boxcar, which can be made operational in a matter of seconds. Fighters were encouraged to attack flak cars first if they could identify them. Moving trains were ideally attacked from a 90-degree angle and not lengthwise to minimize the effectiveness of anti-aircraft guns. Germany armored rail cars in many different ways. This was often improvised. Anti-aircraft cars could be armored with steel, sandbags, or even concrete. Armored cars are most frequently used on the Eastern Front to combat air and ground forces, but armored anti-aircraft cars were also common in the West. One strategy the Germans adopted was setting up decoy trains, which they could park and then bring the boilers up to full steam to gain the attention of fighter aircraft. These trains could be packed with up to 16 flak guns, waiting for fighters. Train strafing ramped up by the Allies in the weeks leading up to the D-Day invasion, which would take place June 6, 1944. On May 21, 1944, known as Chattanooga Day, 500 sorties were flown against the rail system, damaging over 113 locomotives. In the 2 weeks leading up to D-Day, 475 locomotives were damaged by strafing. During this time, the Allies were able to not just strike trains on their lines, but trains trapped, waiting to use blocked lines before lines could be cleared. One strategy reportedly used with success during this time was dropping belly fuel tanks on freight and passenger trains that follow-up fighters could ignite with their guns. Though it's unlikely any such maneuvers were popular, flying over a train was risky. Many aircraft were destroyed simply from debris from explosions. On May 26, the Germans got the hint and ordered a steep reduction in daytime operations. Daytime weekly rail traffic dropped in 1944 from a peak of 190,000 cars traveling per week to 60,000 in France, just in time for D-Day. Ultimately, the effect of train busting hurt German logistics, and logistics wins wars. The Germans were particularly reliant on trains, as they were frequently short on trucks, fuel, and horses. The Germans lost over 100,000 trucks and 200,000 horses between the opening of Barbarossa and March of 1942. To Germany's industrial credit, they did manage to produce an impressive number of trains throughout the war. But of course, the energy spent replacing trains is taken from somewhere else, such as producing tanks. Alright, I'm Johnny. Thanks for staying on track with me until the end of the video. If you want to support the channel, do choose to like, sub, or comment. But most importantly, do have a nice rest of your day.